everyone, and
And here
welcome
we are.
to the Lizzie Borden Tea and Murder Podcast. I'm your host, Kimber Eberly, along with Shelley Dietzick, and our guest tonight, Danielle Cabral. Is that correct? The last name? Cabral?
Cabral,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, good. So,
Cabral.
Danielle, I recognize some of those pictures in that little slideshow for when we did it was a retrial of Lizzie Borden. It was the mock trial. And were you playing Bridget, maybe? Or who were you
I was
playing?
actually playing Emma. Yeah, I always went
Emma.
back to Emma. Yeah.
Okay, good. Emma. All right. So those were some fun times. I did that twice with them, and it was really cool. So anyway, welcome, welcome, welcome. Were you gonna
Thank
say
you for
So,
something,
having
Shelley?
me.
have you, other than Emma, did you ever play any other roles for reenactments or TV programs?
Just the last reenactment, or was it the last two that I was a reporter?
Okay.
Oh,
Yes.
Yeah.
I remember the year we made you an Emma outfit to wear, a little suit, maroon pinstripe, and we had a lot of fun with that. I
wait a
miss
minute. So
doing
you
those
were
reenactments.
yeah, you were a reporter. So they did a reenactment with a reporter in it,
Oh, a
or
whole
or
bunch.
Several
Yeah.
years.
oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I
Yeah,
didn't know
we
that,
did
Shelley. I've
that.
never been to one of
Did
the
that a
reenactments.
number of
So
times.
oh, cool.
Well, we did the reporter angle several times. We had five different scripts, but
So was that
before we
reporter
talk about
during
the
the murders or after the murders took place? I mean, was it, was it what when was it? Before, during, or after that they reported? You know what
oh,
I'm saying?
well, they were walking. Yeah, they were walking around the day of the murder, asking
Okay,
questions.
okay. That's why. Okay.
Usually, yeah,
Yeah.
on the scene of the crime. But before we get to reenactments, I know a lot of our viewers know Danielle from her work at the house from '92, but maybe they don't know a little bit about her background. And I wanted to ask if you're actually a Fall River native. Is this your home city? Your family
No,
from Fall
so I was
River?
born in the city. Yeah, my dad's
Yeah.
side of the family lives in Fall River and is from Fall River, but I have always lived in Rhode Island.
Hmm. It's not too far a commute though from where you live to Fall River now. Yeah, you're on
No,
Aquidneck
25 minutes
Island.
max.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
So
So I
Shelley,
guess,
Shelley, I have a comment already from one of our guests, David Wolf, and he says, "Hey guys, Danielle, you were on our you were our second tour guide and were amazing. You told me things I did not know. My adult kids said their experience at the Lizzie Borden house was their favorite part of our Boston trip. Thank you so much for being part of my 50th birthday gift from my family."
oh,
Oh, that's
that's nice
awesome.
to
Thank you
hear.
so much.
Yeah, yeah. It is. It's great. Uh, I I know that you recently got your master's from Providence College in history, which is no surprise. And did you always know that history was going to be your thing? And um, is that maybe some of the appeal of the Borden case because you like that period in history?
No. So, fun fact, I almost flunked out of history in high school. Uh,
Oh,
I didn't really get a love for history in the way that I do now until I began working at the Lizzie Borden house. I was hired there as a cook originally because that's what I did professionally for years. And Leanne, in her infinite wisdom, gave me a script and said, "You need to know the basics. So when people having breakfast have questions, you can answer them." And that made sense. And she said, "Well, if you'd like to, go around with Robin and train a little bit to do tours, maybe that would be a good fit for you." And I was mortified, which is funny to think about
mm,
now because have spoken publicly for so long. But I was so afraid to
mhm,
talk to people because I was worried that they were paying me to speak, and what if I told them something wrong? So I was absolutely
mhm,
mortified. I kept pushing it off, didn't want to do it. She finally convinced me, and I'm so glad she did. And then when I would do tours and people would ask me questions that I couldn't answer, that bothered me. And I started doing my own research and realized that I fell in love with the idea of research and history because it's not just about the one story, it's about everything else around it that affects it. And because of that,
Mhm.
and partially because of Leanne, I went back to school.
That's a great story. So you did your undergraduate work at Salve Regina in Newport?
Yes, well, a part of it. I
Yeah, that's
did
a
my
part of it.
associates at BCC in Fall River, and then the bachelor's at Salve Regina.
Mhm. That's a great story. I didn't actually know that, and I've known you. When you came to Lizzie's was 2008, I think,
2012.
and you 2012 until 2021. So you were there
Yeah.
quite a while, and so
And
you
have been
must
there
have
many
come to
times
cook.
before on tours, and I spent my 16th birthday there, and yeah.
I didn't know that. Didn't know
Yeah.
that. So you owe it all to Lizzie that you've become a history major and
Yeah,
developed
basically.
a lot. Yeah, Lizzie has done some wonderful things, and we've met some great people thanks to Lizzie and lifelong friends. And here she's inspired some careers. Who knew? I think she'd be
Yeah.
happy about that. Yeah, I think so. Um, so I guess you took over the cooking from Dave Quigley when he retired.
No,
He was the
Jack was
first cook.
actually cooking at the time.
Oh, okay. Okay, Jack Sheridan.
Yeah.
Yeah, he would have come in, I think, a couple cooks afterwards. And I remember when you were training and going around, on our tours, learning the routine. And what did you enjoy the most about working at 92? I always like to know.
Oh God, honestly, there's so many different aspects of it that I liked. Honestly, if I had to pick just one thing, it would probably be doing the night tours for people because you get to be a little bit more personal and you get to go in depth with a lot of stuff that you wouldn't necessarily talk about on the tour or have time to talk about on a day tour because you're limited. So
Hmm.
being able to have a conversation with people who are either just as curious about it as you are or have done an equal amount of research sometimes on the case was the best part. And then afterwards, just sitting down in the sitting room until, I mean, God, Shelly, I know you've done it too. Sometimes 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning with the guests, just talking all things
Or
Lizzie.
later.
Yeah,
Or later sometimes. We had a few all-nighters from time to time. Yeah, and you meet some amazing people too, and you learn from them in the medical profession, the legal profession. I remember meeting a Secret Service man who worked during the Obama administration, and he was fascinating. I learned so much. Um,
oh
you
wow.
know, uh, it works two ways. I mean, you are
Did
presenting history and the story, but you also get a lot back from your guests
did that
from
Secret
all walks of
Service
life.
did that Secret Service guy have any insight that you may not have had because of his experience with the law, so to speak?
Well, yeah, we talked a lot about, the lack of forensic technique at the
Yeah.
crime scene and what should have been done that wasn't done uh, because it just wasn't the way things were done in that time period. And he was saying now, of course, they would have evacuated the house. Everyone would have been thrown out. Lizzie, Bridget, all of them. They would have wrapped a yellow crime scene tape around and come in with a full team because there were a lot of mistakes made. We all remember the story with Captain Desmond and Fleet, and oh, there was a handle, there wasn't a handle. I saw it here. I put it in my pocket, and because you always have to have two people for evidence gathering. To document
So
one person observes. So yeah, I learned a lot about that from him. Uh, and of course,
so
the
Pam,
medical folks, I learned about rigor mortis and stuff like that. I'm sure
yeah.
Danielle did too.
Um, I have an
Yeah.
interesting question. Pamela Howe is wondering to you, Danielle. Oh, there it goes. How you handled the overnight guests who you can tell got dragged to the house by their other friends and families who didn't want to be there. It's funny.
So that
That's a good
absolutely
one.
happened, but it didn't happen as much as people would think. I've had people leave in the middle of the night because they were too perturbed to be there. I have tried to convince people that if, history is not your thing, I promise you this is going to be interactive. So whether you realize it or not, you are going to become a part of this tour as a learning experience. And before you know it, we'll already be upstairs on the second floor, an hour in, and you're not even going to realize the time. And for the most part, it would work because I would ask people questions and I would get them to participate, and we would do, you know, trying to kind of like bust theories, or I would give them everyone's alibi and ask them, well, if you were at the crime scene based on the blood spatter, which I'm going to tell you about right now, how do you think the murders occurred? And I would have everyone start talking about it, trying to put themselves at the scene of the crime. That way they could start pointing their own fingers. And they'd always look to me and go, well, what do you think? I said, well, it doesn't matter what I think. I want you to come up with
Mhm.
your own theories, because at the end of the day, I mean, we're going on a 130-year-old cold case now. So potentially everyone has the best and most accurate theory. I'm just here to give you all of the information. And then at the end, you tell me what you think.
Exactly.
Actually, somebody
Mhm.
thinks it does matter on this podcast that want to know who do you think did it? It's like,
Who's
I think
that?
she was
Oh, David.
acquitted, you know?
it's
Yeah,
like
that's the right
fair enough,
answer.
fair enough, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's good to get different theories, and sometimes guests would come up with ideas that never occurred to me, possibilities, and so it was a real give and take with the guests. And the night tour was wonderful because you had limitless time, to go over the case and try out little experiments, and uh,
Yeah.
it's a wonderful job. It was a wonderful job. I enjoyed every year, and we both worked for Leanne um, for a number of years. And of course, I started with Martha McGinn in '96. So we've probably told this story to how many hundreds, Danielle? Many, many, many people.
I
Yeah,
would say
I
hundreds of
really miss
thousands
it.
at this point.
I would say probably thousands is not far from the mark. Yeah, over 18 years. Um,
I'm really
so
impressed that you got to know Martha McQuinn. Like, wasn't she like the first owner of the house, Shelley?
yeah, yeah.
Wow.
Her grandparents, Josephine and John McGinn,
Oh, right.
started the
Okay.
Leary Press in the 1940s, and they ran the Leary Press. Martha grew up there. She would stay with her grandparents. And when Josephine died in 1995, Martha and the shop foreman Ron Evans got the idea. It was a lot of it was really Ron Evans, um, because the house had not been open to the public, and so many people wanted to see the inside of that house, and then they wanted to stay overnight. So that's how it all came into being, and it was wonderful to be there at the beginning. And and then of course they sold it in 2004 to Donald and Leanne,
Hmm.
and Danielle and I worked for them for a number of years, and enjoyed that experience. And each owner has brought their own little twist to it, and there was a bigger focus on the paranormal, which got to
Yeah.
be very, very popular along around, I'd say maybe 2015, 2016. You saw a lot of those programs on TV. So that was something we really didn't have at the beginning. It was pretty much strictly just the history of the case and of the city of Fall River. And Danielle can tell you, working now at the Historical Society, Fall River is a pretty darn interesting city with a textile history, with a maritime history of the Fall River line, a granite history of the granite industry. And so I wanted to ask Danielle, how did you come about working now at the Fall River Historical Society? You're no longer working at 92. You finished your education, and how did that come about?
When I was working on my undergrad at Salve, I asked the professor specifically if I could do an internship at a historical society, and they recommended Newport. And I had asked if I could do it in Fall River because I had, personal connections to Fall River, and it would be more interesting to me. And they gave in, they obliged me, and I did my internship there at the historical society, and I ended up working on the Charlton letters. And because
And
of that project
who
that I was,
who are the
sorry?
Charltons? Tell everybody who are the
Oh,
Charltons.
so Earl Perry
Yeah.
Charlton started a slew of stores, of five and dime stores, and then he ended up partnering with Frank Woolworth in 1912. And so his children became heirs to, millions. And his daughter, one of them specifically Ruth, we have a lot of her letters that I am personally transcribing. And so, by the generosity of the Charlton family, I was given the opportunity to be grant funded to do this project. And because Michael knew that I had worked with these letters during my internship, he had called and asked if I would be interested in continuing the project. And I don't think I even let him finish the question before I said yes. And so I started just working on the project throughout grad school. And as soon as I graduated, they brought me on full time to keep working on this project.
Wow, that's
Mhm.
great. That's really great. Fantastic.
Well, it's a beautiful place to work. If you've never been to the Historical Society, you absolutely need to go when you come to
Yes, it's
Fall
so
River. And
beautiful.
yeah.
I've been there
So
once.
are
Yeah, and I was just amazed at, first of all, how they could move that house, because that's not the original spot where the house was. I was told that they moved
Right.
it from, I'm not sure from where, but I just to move that
Columbia
whole house
Street.
is, yeah, I was
Yeah, it
just
was on
amazed at
Columbia
that.
Street.
Yeah. And
Mhm.
then what really got me was the round dining room, the round
Hmm.
with the rounded woodwork, how they curved that whole room was, I
Mhm.
just was fascinated by it, and how tall the cupboards were. I call them cupboards. Um
Yeah.
like you need a ladder to get up there to get like dishes,
Yes, you
and
do.
yeah, but I'm wondering, why would they build like my mind goes to strange places. Like, if you owned a house like that, why would you build the cupboard so high? Is that where they kept storage? I don't know, but to get like teacups down or something to have like a tea in the dining room.
Well,
I
you had servants to worry about it. Yeah, you had the
they would have to
servants. You
climb
didn't
up
have
the
to worry.
ladder to get them. It's like, and
That's
then when I
okay.
was there, I had the experience, which was really exciting. They had the original photo of the jury. I believe it was the original on like this easel in the living room. It was pretty large. I mean, well, it was pretty large. I don't know exactly what size it was, but I was just amazed at being able to see that photo, because I think that was the actual photo that they gave Lizzie. Am I correct, Daniel?
That I don't know. That I have
Oh,
not seen.
you've never seen
Yeah.
big jury photo?
The only picture that I've seen of that is the copy that we used to have hanging at 92 in the front parlor.
Mhm.
So I've seen the picture of the
Um,
jury. It's not the original one. If
so I'm not sure if it's the would they have a copy out on an easel if it was still a copy and not the original? Because to me, the way they presented it, it seemed like it was the original one, the
it's
original
possible,
photo.
but I just don't know.
We'll
I'm not
find
sure.
out. We're going to
Yeah,
find out tomorrow. You're
I'm
going to
I'm
ask.
curious. Yeah.
Well, that's a good segue, Kimber, into what I had to ask next. I understand there were some renovations at the Historical Society over the winter, and can you tell us what happened there and when you'll be opening again for the season?
Yeah, so we had a very generous donor, Doug Borden, fund a art gallery for us. So what would have been the music room on the first floor of the Historical Society has now been converted into an art gallery. So that will be
Oh.
open when we open to the public a little while after that. We are opening, I believe it is the second week of May to the public. So we'll start doing tours and the gift shop will be open. So that will be exciting.
Mhm.
And we are having two major infrastructure projects that are going to be happening in the future. We're going to have an HVAC system being installed, which will be great because then we'll have a temperature controlled environment. And the roof is going to be replaced as well. So, two huge
Oh,
projects being upcoming very
yeah.
soon, hopefully.
It
Yeah.
sounds like much
So we're
needed
talking,
projects.
yeah,
Yeah.
air
Oh,
conditioning. We're
absolutely. Yes.
talking. Yeah. Boy, you've needed air
Mhm.
conditioning for a long time. It's really hot in that house in the summertime, even from a
It's
conservation point of
extremely
view.
warm.
Yeah.
Even when we have the fans blowing on the floor, it is quite toasty. The granite does a beautiful job of insulating, and in the summertime it doesn't insulate in the way you want.
So, I mean, the pressing question, if I worked there, I would, oh, we have a question here. Do you know, is there anything special coming up for August 4th this year? This is Joanne.
Not as far as I know, just because of the work that we have upcoming. So we have to be extremely fluid in how we're going to be operating. So we really don't know what that's going to
Mhm.
look like as far as, specialties or exhibits or tours for the future. So just keep your ears to the ground, keep looking at our Facebook
Oh,
page. Our new
yeah.
website will be up and running as soon as we open. So everything will be
Oh,
there. It's going to be fantastic. It's absolutely beautiful.
So as
So
far as
that's
a
new and
new
exciting.
website.
I'm interested in
Yeah.
the art gallery that you said you're gonna have. Are they gonna have different people curating that, or is it gonna be the like a specific art that you're gonna have monthly, or is it gonna be like there for a long time, or what artwork?
So the exhibits are going to rotate. I don't know how often. That's going to be done by the curator. And it's a lot of the pieces that over the past couple of years we've had the opportunity to start collecting. So a lot of Fall River artists of the period, we've been lucky enough that during COVID, when we've been closed to the public, that we were able to acquire a lot of really beautiful pieces. So we'll be able to start exhibiting those
Oh,
in a space appropriately. And it's just I think
that's
everyone, when you
interesting.
come seeing the music room as it was to now seeing it converted into a gallery, it's going to be a wild experience to see it and to see the artwork. You know, it's going
Yeah,
to
I'm
give it
excited.
justice, you know?
I'm definitely gonna come and check that out because that I love
Yeah.
stuff like that. Yeah.
Well, it's great now that
Yeah.
you'll be able to exhibit some stuff that used to have to be stored. There just wasn't room to put it out because I know it's a vast collection of the Fall River artists, and I think you even have some Franklin Miller, uh, Southern Miller, who built the Borden House. His son Franklin was an artist, and I think you have some of his paintings as well. Well, tell us what's going on in the what we call the Lizzie room at the Historical Society. Is that still going to be in the usual spot up front?
It it is as of right now. It is a lot
Mhm.
smaller than what people are used to seeing because of
Oh,
having to move things for the renovation for the gallery. So there are still I would say, the normal things that are in there. We still, of course, have exhibits from the trial and pictures of the family. We have Lizzie's lunch pail and the stool from Taunton Jail. There's a lot of pictures and different things like that. So it's what you would expect to see at a museum, undoubtedly. It's just a little bit smaller in scale. And there's a lot of stuff, as Shelley knows, that we just can't put out on exhibit all the time. So usually we wait for special events to bring those out and show them because of their age and because of how
like
fragile
what
some
would
of
that
the
be?
items
What
are.
would that what would that be? For example, what don't you bring out all the time? What items?
So for a couple of the anniversaries of the murders, we would bring out the bedspread and the pillow sham, and it's
Hmm.
extremely delicate, and that would be set up in another floor of the house just because where the Borden exhibit is now, there's not enough space to put a bed.
Yeah.
So it would
Mhm.
be taken and almost, duplicated so you could see
Oh
what it would have looked like
wow.
in the room at the time.
Oh wow. That's
But
so cool.
there's
Yeah.
yeah, there's a lot of really interesting artifacts there, and I would say that if you're interested in the Borden case, we have the largest collection of artifacts in the world on the Bordens. And there's just a vast amount in there that we really don't get a chance to talk about on the tour because we want to give you the Reader's Digest version, basically, as accurately as possible, while also giving you time to look around at the stuff that's in the cases. So you can come back and continuously see new things, even if it hasn't been rotated out yet because you'll have time to look more closely in a case and notice that, oh, there's Lizzie's meatloaf recipe in there, or there's postcards from Emma's trip abroad, or down here there's, you know, it's a little gory, but there's samples of Mrs. Borden's stomach contents right next to pictures of the skulls that were used in court. So, I
Really,
mean,
they
there is
saved
something
that?
for, yeah, yeah,
Like
there's
in a
the toe
jar? They
tags and
Oh
it's in
wow.
slides. Yeah, there's a slide and then
Little
there's a little
slide.
vial of stomach
Oh,
contents. Yeah.
wow.
Mhm.
Okay.
Well, I've got to ask you, Danielle, have you ever held the hatchet head?
No, no, I've had no reason to go
No.
on the case. I haven't had to clean it yet.
Oh,
So, one of these days when we
yeah.
change the exhibits, I'll ask Michael, can I hold it?
Uh, I got to do that back in 1991 briefly, and it was a moment you don't forget. Is there a particular item that you find, most exciting from the case when you see it? For me, it was the hatchet head. It really was. You
So
got to
this is
think
kind of
back. There's
obscure, I guess, because by the time I had started working at the Historical Society, I had already been doing the Lizzie Borden story for almost 10 years. And I had gone to the Historical Society to see the artifacts so I could get a better understanding of what things would have looked like and, to be able to see the stool and, how life would have been for Lizzie when she was in jail. But one of the things that I absolutely love is for me kind of strange, and it's a punch bowl. It's a punch bowl with cups, and it was a gift from
Mhm.
Lizzie to Mr. Lomax. So Terry Lomax was the groundskeeper at Oak Grove Cemetery, and in
Mm.
1904, I think is around the time that they ended up meeting. And a lot of people don't think or know that Lizzie visited the cemetery quite frequently and they ended up hitting it off and he respected her a lot and they would go for walks in the cemetery and he would always make sure that it was shoveled out for her to visit in inclement weather and they would always take strolls and he would bring her back to the carriage and when he ended up getting married she gave him and his new bride a punch bowl set and we have that now and I think that's
Oh
kind of a
wow.
beautiful story of someone who knew Lizzie after the trial and never spoke ill about her always stood up for her. He didn't speak about her much at all, and when he did, he would allude to that he felt sorry for her. Um, but it's kind of nice to be able to see different artifacts at the Historical Society that really speak volumes to who Lizzie was as a person, not who Lizzie was as the accused, potential, acquitted axe murderess. It really
Mhm.
humanizes her, and knowing so much more about the story, it also humanizes Mr. Borden in a way that people seem to think that he was not a nice person and was very mean and strict and harsh in his household. And with knowing different things and finding out different things about him, like him carrying letters from the girls in his pocket and, reading them to people that he knew, to me speaks a little bit about closeness and him wanting to take care of his girls by buying them a house closer to the hill. And we know these things now, and the letter thing is posted in the Jennings Journal. So some of this is all new information, which is fantastic. And
Yeah, I was
I think every time we learn something, it rotates the thought a little bit, so you think about things just a little bit differently than you did before.
yeah, I wasn't aware of
That's a
letters
good
from the
point.
girls and Mr. Borden read. How do you know he read them to people?
So it's actually in the Jennings journals. We found that
Okay.
information out. So it's we know for sure, and I believe it was someone that had said it or was documented or something of the sort, but I would highly recommend reading that. There's also a lot of stuff that gives insight to who Lizzie was as a person from one of her friend's diaries when she was younger. And there's a lot
Mhm.
of back and forth from when she was older as well, when she was known as Lizbeth and the children that she would be very affectionate towards would call her Auntie Borden. And she would give gifts to little girls and little boys, and she became very friendly with her chauffeur's children and took very good care of them. And so it for me, it just drastically changes how you think about this person, because it's not just a story of a nursery rhyme anymore. You're really learning about who this individual was, and it becomes less about the murders and more about telling the story of the people. Because I mean, to be quite frank, if it wasn't for these two brutal murders that happened, the Borden family would be of no consequence to the city of Fall River, because
Right.
Mr. Borden was not, a multimillionaire. He was absolutely comfortable in his own regard, but he was not able to keep up with the people on the hill, because he was not
Hmm.
in that same financial area, stay in your own lane, as they
Hmm.
say. So he was not accepted
Yeah.
into that area of society. His daughters weren't accepted into that area of society just because they weren't in that tax bracket.
I thought he was a
Hmm.
multimillionaire though. When he died,
Hmm.
he had millions.
No, so he was worth around $350,000 when he died in 1892. And on the high end, and I mean like the absolute high end, all of his assets together may have been worth around $8 million today. That's a lot
Okay,
For
of
so that's a
money,
today's money.
seemingly
multi-million.
so,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
we're talking about
Hmm.
the people who lived in the hill in 1892 were
Mhm.
worth tens of twenties of millions then. So he's worth
Hmm.
350,000 compared to 10, $20 million then. He was making the same amount of money that people would doing what he did. He was a businessman, he was an investor, he was managers of banks. He was very smart with his money and he was very good at what he did, but he was not wealthy in the sense that he could keep up with the Charltons and the Braytons
Right.
and people like that.
Yeah, because they were like super 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 rich.
Yeah,
Yeah.
extremely so. So the idea that he had all this money and was forcing his family to live a life of squalor, it kind of gets put into perspective when you realize the amount of wealth that people in Fall River had. They
But
compare it to the
Lizzie,
Rockefellers and things like that. I mean, people in Fall River
Hmm.
could compete with the Rockefellers, but not
right.
Mr. Borden.
Yes.
But Lizzie
Yeah.
did move to the hill after he died with his inheritance. So he could afford to live like at a place like Maplecroft,
Yeah, so they
correct?
definitely could have
Yeah.
afforded to live in that area, but not like the people in that area. So he wouldn't have been able to live at that scale. And because Lizzie was only taking care of her and her sister, you don't have to worry about taking care of other people as well. And we know that Mr. Borden was in the process of purchasing a house closer to that area of town. We even know the house that he was looking at purchasing. It just never came to fruition, and we just
Hmm.
don't know why.
Hmm. That's curious. What
Do
what?
you
Go
have
ahead,
the
Jen.
address of that house? Yeah, the house that they were considering looking at. Do we
Not
know
off the
what
top of my
street that
head. I
was
know
on?
it was on
Yeah,
North Main Street.
on North Main.
Hmm.
Mm.
So
Who
it definitely
knows
wasn't
if
in the
that
hill.
the story could have had a different ending if that had happened and he'd actually purchased that. I guess we'll never know. Speaking about Maplecroft, though, Danielle, you were in the an enviable position of having a lot of access to Maplecroft over the past few years, where you could go and I know Sue, our friend Sue Vickery, that we had on this program before, was taking care of the property, so you were able to. What was that like to be able to visit Maplecroft just pretty much when you ever wanted to, like the first
It
time you went
was
in there?
it was surreal. I think the first time I went was when we were all there for the reenactment and we were dressed up in
Yeah.
1890s garb, and it was just so unbearably hot. I remember we all looked like wet rats after. But it was
Well,
a
I
beautiful
think was
experience
that
to be in the house.
yeah, that's when Bob Doobie still owned it, and when we went all of us went over in costume. Was that
I
when
don't
Bob Doobie
It might have been.
or Christy Bates? Yeah, I think it
Oh, yeah,
was.
maybe Christy.
Yeah, Christy Bates. And then, of course, Christy sold to Donald and Leanne.
Yeah,
I
she had
forget
it
what
for a
year
really
that
short
was.
time, Christy, but she did a lot of work on the house.
Yeah, lot
Yeah.
of work, a
She
couple of
did, yeah.
years. And so, what did you think, though, the first time you saw Maplecroft when you walked in?
Okay, so we all seem to like Lizzie, and if she did the crime, we seem to feel that she did it because of her situation. For some reason, we all have something in us that can emphasize, that we can emphasize. Wait, empathize. Okay, I
Empathize.
think this is
Yeah.
why we're talking about her.
Hmm.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, we're still talking about her. I think they'll still
Yeah,
be talking about her in another
this is
100
true.
years. Yeah,
So,
because
so what was your question,
well,
Shelley?
we were just talking about the first time you go into Maplecroft. I
Oh,
was surprised that it was a lot smaller on the inside than I thought. The parlor isn't real large. The foyer in the front is enormous. The front foyer entryway, and then the dining room is fairly modest. And upstairs, the bedrooms really weren't that large. You know, they call it a mansion. I don't know that I would call it a mansion. It was just a large Queen Anne style Victorian home in a nice neighborhood. That's how it impressed me. How did it impress you? If
When
it
I
did.
first walked in, it did impress me, honestly, because I
Mm,
was shocked that it had a similar feel to Second Street in the sense that it was almost like a room to room type of thing,
mm-hmm.
which for me, I'm not used to. I'm used to having hallways in a house that, lead to other locations. So Fall River was a little bit different because you do go from one room to another. And that was interesting at Maplecroft. I loved the kitchen and the back stairs. That was really interesting. And the library was absolutely beautiful.
Yeah. So when I went to Maplecroft, the first impression I got when I walked in that it was dark because of I think all
mm,
the dark wood. I just thought it was
yeah.
dark, and if the curtains aren't open, it's really dark in the house. So I'm walking around like okay, but my favorite room was the back bedroom. I love that room with the fireplace, and they had an extra bathroom in there. And I didn't like the back stairway because you could really hurt yourself if you're not careful. Because
Mm,
I don't know, back in that time period, they built staircases that were so like first of all 80 degrees. I mean, like it's like you're climbing up a ladder almost to
you
go up
have to
those
be a mountain
staircases.
goat to get up the,
Yeah,
yeah,
and
it's
how the
so
women
steep.
Yeah, no grade
function.
regulations back then.
No, carrying laundry and stuff up and down those stairs. I was holding on the railing for dear life when I'm going up, even at the Borden house, the 92nd Street, right? So,
Hmm. Hmm.
how
I can't tell
do
you
you?
the amount of times I fell up the stairs at
Oh
92
no, oh
carrying
no,
laundry or, oh yeah, up and down.
oh my God, they're so dangerous. And but what just real? Do you think Danielle that was Lizzie's bedroom where she passed away? You think that was the room, or because there were a lot of it's confusing Maplecroft of whose room was whose room. Like I think we know who
If I
what
had to make an
Emma's.
educated guess, I would say that that wasn't. I think her room was in the center of the house, the one that doubled with the French doors.
Right, right. That yeah. But you don't think she used that bedroom also, or the back
I
bedroom?
don't think so.
So what was that for then? That they built
I
that?
think it I think it was an addition, but I don't know the purpose that it held because one of those things I don't like to speculate about stuff because we
Yeah,
weren't there.
yeah.
So I don't want my own thoughts and opinions to be considered fact.
In right in Parallel Lives, though, I think Martin discusses Maplecroft, and when they built that addition, that he said it was her summer bedroom, or he explained it in Parallel Lives that it was one of her bedrooms for a season. I'm not sure which season it was. I don't remember which one, but
I
she
would think
switched back and
summer because,
forth.
yeah, it was
Summer, and
shady.
she
There were a lot of trees
yeah
in the
yeah.
backyard. Mm,
Because I mean, I always thought that
very
maybe
private.
she stayed in that like I don't know if I was her and I lived in a house that would have been my favorite bedroom. I would have been in there all the time. But but
There was a call button. I know there was a
there
little
was,
a
right?
button
Yes.
you could press behind the door to ring for servant.
Yeah.
And
So my other
yeah,
favorite part of the house was the garage. So the garage, it was just so amazing because they drove the cars up on that round metal thing
Turntable.
turntable that
Yeah.
turned,
Hmm.
and who has that in the 1800s? That's money. So when you talk about Maplecroft not having money, they put money into that. You know what I'm
Three
saying?
thousand dollars. Three
Yeah,
thousand dollars to build that garage,
that was
which was a heck
amazing.
of a lot of money. And she had her own gas tank as well,
Yeah, yeah,
which Sue showed us. It's still there. I hope the new owners, keep all of the things that were original to the house, including that gas tank. But yeah, we just found out how much that was this morning. That addition. It was in the newspaper. I found a clipping and posted it on my
I saw
Facebook
that
page.
article. Yeah,
Yeah,
that was
three
interesting.
grand.
So I have two
Yeah.
comments. One from Joey. He says, Danielle, with all your experience, do you have a Lizzie book of yours? Like he said he would most definitely read it.
No, I've been saying
Oh,
for years that there's gonna be a book, and I have started writing a couple of different times, but nothing's ever come to fruition yet, and I don't quite know the layout that I'm gonna go with. Being a history major, everything is extremely objective for me, and I want to
Yeah,
keep it that way of just giving people the information and letting you come up with your own conclusion. But I do want to do some type of like fun fact things and, what it was like either being a tour guide or some like behind the scenes things
that
at
would be cool.
92 because it really was my second home for almost 10 years.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
And then I have
And
another
it gets to
question.
be like family. That's very true. And actually, most of us still, stay in touch and keep track on who's doing what and where we are, and
Hmm.
try to get together once in a while. And
So they're picking your brain tonight. So
oh,
Danielle,
another question.
why do
Yeah.
you think Lizzie burned the dress?
So this is always an interesting question. So again, objective, get down to the facts. What actually happened? She burned a dress in the stove. What was on the dress? No one knows to this day. If I had to make an educated guess on what took place, it was something simple. Many people said there was paint on the dress because the house was painted. She scuffed up against it, showing Emma the new dress as she was trying it on. And not being able to just throw something in the trash. If you couldn't burn it, you buried it. Well, you can burn a dress. You wouldn't want to bury it. Maybe it was cut up for rags already. Maybe it was already in pieces in the back. Who knows? Maybe the under part was used for pieces. Who knows? But I just think it was put in that closet for the intent of being burned. And it was just one of those odd series of events where, she was given morphine because she was completely beside herself by Dr. Bowen and also bromoil caffeine to quiet her migraine. And so I think it was just a perfect storm of events that ended up looking a lot more suspicious than perhaps it would have in normal circumstances. Because you have to keep in mind, she's standing in plain sight, side door open, police officers on the property. If anyone were to walk by, they could have seen exactly what she was doing. And her friend Alice Russell saw her, asked what she was going to do, and she says, of course, this whole thing is covered in paint. I'm going to burn it. Alice Russell suggests that she shouldn't and leaves the room. Lizzie then rips the dress up and throws it in the stove. So to be a fly on the wall, that would be great. I know we all say that about the entire day. If we could be a fly on the wall from 6 a.m. to perhaps 2
Mm,
p.m., we would
uh-huh.
all have the best book in the world to write.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's not what you know, it's what you can prove. And the only thing that I can prove is that she burned a dress that four people said had paint on it.
Yeah.
So, do you think that there's still evidence to uncover? Because at the law firm, is it Robinson's law firm? There's
Yes, in
still
Springfield.
there's still material that hasn't been looked at yet. Has the historical society attempted to get any of that material, or
So
would the
that's
case be
all.
over if we learned the truth?
I don't think the case would be over if we did learn the truth. I don't think that we ever will.
Yeah.
After this long, I mean, it's just, who knows? I mean, when Michael Martins and Dennis Bennett wrote Parallel Lives, they had no idea the amount of information that was still out there.
Hmm.
So knowing how that expanded in 10 years to personal letters and photographs of Lizzie, or, then Lizbeth, personal communications, plate sets, gifts that she bought for people, letters that she wrote, all these different things they didn't know was there. So imagine what it's going to be in the next 10 years. Imagine what's going to pop up and what we find. As far as a law firm, we don't have access to that because it is held by the firm. So that's,
Yeah.
unattainable at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
But I would tell everyone, if you don't have Parallel Lives, go out and buy it. And I'm not doing that as a selfless plug. Maybe a little bit. Maybe a little bit for the Historical Society, but it has so much information in it, and it doesn't read from cover to cover. It's a compendium of short stories with a plethora of information, not just on the Bordens, but Fall River herself. And there is stuff in there that was released to the Historical Society for the purpose of writing the book, but it's still in private collections. So a lot of that stuff may never be released to the public.
Yeah.
And so you get a little sneak peek into something that no one else may ever see by just reading the book. And some of the stories you get to hear by just flipping through pages. You're bored one day on a Sunday, pick up the book, open it to a random page, and read for 15 minutes, and you'd be amazed at the stories that you could learn about Fall River.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
actually have my copy autographed by the
Mm-hmm.
authors.
Awesome. We love that.
Yeah, yeah, I do.
Well, Dennis said there's still so much left that didn't get into the book that they could write another book, and probably a book about Emma. They have enough material to even do more. So I'm hoping maybe someday there will be more with what didn't make it into Parallel Lives. I
Yeah.
know I had a bruise from reading Parallel Lives in bed. The book weighs about 6 pounds, and I got biceps, from lifting it.
I used a
Um,
pillow
Oh, yeah. Yep.
a
to read
pillow,
mine.
yeah,
I did, I swear.
you
So,
did.
Joey asked, does the Historical Society have any artifacts from the case that have yet to be put on display, or any future books that are coming out?
Future books that are coming out on the Borden case, no. As far as I know, nothing in the works. The Jennings journals was the last thing that was our big reveal. So if you
Yeah,
haven't bought that, go buy that, because that's how we knew that Mr. Borden kept the personal letters. It's not a book for someone who doesn't have background on the Borden case. You really have to do
Right.
your due diligence and do research. But
Mm.
if you have a substantial baseline, you're going to start picking through this and go, oh my God, this is so neat. This adds another piece to the puzzle. And it's not going to crack the case open. This is not going to help you solve who done it, but it just adds all the more layers to an already really fascinating story.
I
And as
was,
far as artifacts, there's stuff, of course, that we have in our collection that we don't have out, and it's just because of a lack of space. And it's not that we're trying to hide things or not show people. We just unfortunately don't have the area to put things in right now. So hopefully, um, that will change when the exhibit changes.
right.
anything in
I have an,
particular that that we haven't seen that we would like to know about?
I don't know. I
Well,
don't
the
know what
beds.
people have or
Yeah.
haven't seen, so I would say stay tuned.
Ah,
so,
okay.
Pamela Howe said a book about Emma after leaving Maplecroft would be amazing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Oh, it would be because there's so much to that story. People think that she just went off and lived in one location and then that was it. But we all know who Reverend Buck is, and
Yes.
that was her spiritual advisor for years, him to the
Mm-hmm.
family as well. And
Mm-hmm.
she lived there for years with his daughters. And then she
About,
bounced around
yeah.
to a couple of
Yeah.
different locations before she settled in
Mm-hmm.
New Hampshire. So I mean, if those walls could talk, Shelley, you saw the blog post that I did on the photograph of his sitting room, and I can
Yes,
only imagine Emma
yeah,
sitting there with one of the daughters,
I
either
colorized that.
reading or,
Yeah.
yeah, I saw that. It was really beautiful.
Isn't she
We,
doing a
yeah.
beautiful job with colorizing all of the characters in the story? I mean,
It
Shelley,
Yeah, it's
helps
that's
interesting. It's
sometimes.
interesting.
amazing. Yeah.
It helps to
Um,
bring things to life. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But once I colorized, Reverend Buck's study, you could almost picture her sitting in that chair and him in the rocker giving her advice, giving Emma advice. It's a shame he didn't
Yeah.
live longer because Reverend Buck died in 1903,
Hmm.
and Emma still hung out at Maplecroft for another 2 years, even though he had advised her 2 years before that she should leave if things were
Hmm.
that uncomfortable, uh, living with Lizzie as she was. I love detail too, and I agree, Danielle. Every little piece, no matter how small, I think adds dimension to the people. They're multifaceted. Every detail about the people and also the places. It's like putting a jigsaw puzzle. You think this piece of red must be a shoe, and it isn't. It's maybe a hat or something else. And when you put it in the right place, suddenly the picture shifts a little bit. So there's no detail too small. These little bits and pieces, and the fun is in the research. And I think you,
Oh,
Yeah.
I couldn't agree
yeah,
more. And the same
yeah,
Yeah.
thing, the when I started doing the blog that I'm doing now, one of the first ones that I did was the police report on the police entry in the logbook on Lizzie.
mm-hmm,
And she had to call the police to her house because kids were taunting her by throwing stones and gravel at her windows. And we all know the nursery rhyme, and of course she was taunted with that, but I always like to pose this question to people. Imagine if it was just a really unfortunate circumstance that she was put in and had nothing to do with it at all. Regardless, she had to spend almost a year in jail waiting for her fate to be, you know, given by her peers in a 13-day trial. And then, regardless of the outcome, it drastically changed the course of her life and how she was treated because of one day
I'm
yeah.
that
thinking
she may or may
about
not have had anything to do with.
thinking about her being in jail that long. Why did the trial take so long? Like why was she, almost a year to
Things kept getting pushed back, so the dates kept getting extended because of
yeah.
trying to look for or finding new evidence. So there
Okay,
was a lot
okay.
of talk between the lawyers going on during that time to try to see if they could come up with a good either defense or
Wow.
prosecution. And we all know the outcome.
Yeah. So I have a couple more questions. The questions you
Sure.
keep pouring it. They're gonna while we have you here,
Yeah,
Danielle, they're
yeah,
gonna use and abuse you. Sorry.
absolutely. That's what I'm here for. Ask
So,
away.
did you have any ghost experiences?
Yes. Um, my I would say my favorite experience was the one that I had close to the end of my career at the boarding house. Tim was in the dining room helping me set up for breakfast the next day. So we were setting the dining room table, and I went into the kitchen to grab more plates. And I remember turning around because I caught something out of the corner of my eye. And as I looked, if you're in the sitting room right behind the couch, you walk from behind the couch into the dining room. So you can see someone walk if you're in the kitchen. And I caught something move and I turned to look and I saw this figure in white walk from the sitting room into the dining room. And so I said nothing at first. Then I walked into the sitting room and then into the dining room, like copied the path because I thought someone had walked in there to go talk to Tim. So I didn't want to keep talking to him. And when no one was in there, I was a little startled and I had asked Tim, like, did anyone just come in here? And he was like, no. Like, so no one walked in here at all. And he said, no. And I was like, I swear to you, I just saw someone walk in here and it was a woman in white. And that made me think about it later on. Oh, I wonder if that was maybe Mrs. Borden going to get, the pillowcases out of the closet, the last thing that she did before she passed away. And so it was interesting that my mind went to that. And I also couldn't believe what I had seen. So, do my night tour. Fast forward to the next day, Sue Vickery comes in and I'm sitting down, I'm talking to her. I said, you're never going to guess what happened last night. It was the coolest thing. For the first time ever, I saw something with my own eyeballs. And I explained to her what I saw, and she said, I saw the same thing, but on my day tour. And someone else in the day tour saw the same thing as well. She thought she was
David's
waiting for another guest, and she saw a woman in white go behind someone into Lizzie's room. And I think it was something along the lines of, can you stay with the tour? Or she asked the last person, is anyone behind you? And they said no. So it was kind of cool that on the same day, but at different times, we saw the same thing.
That's crazy because the man David that asked the question, he said, "Awesome." He had the same experience also.
Yeah,
That's crazy. Ooh, you're
interesting.
giving me creepies. Okay.
Well, it could have been Hannah Trafton. Hannah Trafton died
Yeah,
there.
of
Other
consumption,
people have,
right? Or was that her daughter? Or
no,
one of the
I
children
think,
died of consumption.
yeah, she had a son who died, baby boy, and she
Yeah.
died there. But, other people have died in that house as well.
Hmm.
I'm not sure if Mrs. McGinn didn't die there, Josephine McGinn. Her
I believe she
bedroom,
did.
her
Was the
bedroom
dining room.
was the dining room, and when I first saw 92, it was 1994. No, I guess it was 95 because she had just died. And it was all left the way it was the day she died. And her bedroom was in the dining room. And where the black sofa was this big old fashioned console TV like we had back in the 60s. They were huge, these things, where the sofa was. And I wish I had taken pictures. I was so excited to be in the house. I didn't even think about taking pictures. It was after one of the Lizzie expos. And I'm wondering, when it was rented out as a boarding house, other people died at the house. So when they have these ghostly apparitions, they may not necessarily have anything to do with the Bordens. It
Right.
could
Hmm.
be from any
Yeah,
number of
absolutely.
things. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
any number of
I
things.
agree, Shelley, totally with that.
Yeah.
I'm trying to catch up. Pamela said, could the historical society use the building next door that they use for the tea room for extra space?
Oh, the Easton House.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, so we have the tea room, but with the upcoming projects that we have, that's kind of become another storage facility for us because we have
Uh,
to move so many things out of the main house.
mhm.
We have that for another storage location. So we are using it, just not in a way that would be, open to the public.
Oh, so you call it a tea room. Did you at one time have like tea and breakfast there, or was it an
We would do
actual tea
teas,
room?
yeah, we would do high teas. We would do tea with Mrs. Claus.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Christmas. Christmas is amazing at the Historical Society. I'm hoping this year they'll be able to bring it back. After COVID, there were a couple of years, and then now the renovations. You think maybe Christmas of this year they'll be able to decorate again? We
I
really
don't
miss
know.
it. Oh,
Yeah, we do too. Trust me,
yeah.
we every year have to tell people we're not doing the Christmas trees and there's no tea and it's tough because we want to be able to get back and do that as well, but we just
Hmm.
haven't been able to do that with everything that we've been working on in house. So it looks a little strange because we're not interacting with the public as much as we have been in the past, but we will. We're just trying to make it a better experience in the future. So unfortunately, we got to turn inward right now and, gratefully
Can
enough, are able to have all these projects being worked on
um
by very generous donors. So
Yeah, yeah. It'd be
can,
worth it in the end. We just have to be patient and wait a little longer. But, I can't wait to see the return of all the great functions that have gone on there for so many years.
so there's some paintings in the historical society too, and it was explained to me. Maybe you could explain it again because I was a little confused with it about children when they pass away. Like if you look at a painting of a child, it has if it has clouds on it, that means he passed away. Or there's some like when painters paint children, there's a certain way they paint them if they're alive or dead. I mean, it sounds like a little morbid, but maybe you
yeah,
could.
so there's actually a
Oh,
lot of Victorian traditions that have gone by the wayside, such as
Yeah,
mourning photography or mourning stationery, different brooches that you could wear, and paintings, like you said.
yeah.
Traditionally, if a child had passed and they were doing a painting afterwards, there would be flowers that were upside down, and
Oh,
that could
okay,
signify death. So if a child had a downward turned uh, flower in their hand, then that would be indicative of that they had passed away.
okay.
Or
I
that
knew
could
it
be
was
added in
something.
later to a
Yeah.
painting that was already done.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
because I think they
symbolism.
had some paintings like that
Hmm.
in the historical society on the second floor, maybe, or
Yes.
no, might have been in the big room on the first floor. I'm not sure. I don't
No,
remember.
no, it's the second
It
floor.
was the second
Before you
floor.
go down the back
The back
stairs.
steps, which were dangerous too, by the way.
Very
Yeah, the
steep.
servant
Yeah.
stairs. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a whole morning
Um,
room there. So we had
mhm.
a black
Okay,
dress and all the accoutrement that one would wear in mourning, earrings, jewelry, and everything alike.
and
We had a death
hair
mask.
in like brooches or something.
Hair
Yeah,
jewelry.
so yeah, there'd be jewelry. There's a lot of pictures that could be done as well. Crosses that could be woven with hair. You could do flowers or anything intricate like that. And it would just depend from family to family how they would use it for mourning. And as you're coming out of your mourning period, the colors begin to change in shade to dark purples and grays when you come out of black. And the significance of the thick lines on the stationery begin to thin a little bit. So
Oh
Mm-hmm.
people are
wow.
knowing that you're coming out of your mourning period. So it's morbid for sure. And I always get teased at work that I am Morticia and I am the morbid one because things around that always has fascinated me because
Um, Me
it's
as well.
long-standing
Yeah.
traditions that we just don't do anymore, and it's the
Mhm.
subtlety of it, right? It's the non-verbal communication to the outside world, and I love subtleties like that. So a lot of
Yeah.
those traditions I think I cling very close to just because we do not do things like that anymore. Something as simple as getting a hair receiver, which I have in my room that I'm sure creeps people out, but it's a crystal-leaded hair receiver. And for the people who don't know what I'm talking about, it is a place to store your hair that you would take out of your own hairbrush and you could collect and then later on make things
Weave
like
it, right?
bracelets or jewelry or just very beautiful, intricate pictures. And if you follow me on Instagram or Facebook, I have a picture of it up there somewhere. So feel free to
That's
stalk my
amazing.
pages.
Now,
You'll find
before
a myriad of
before I
things.
forget, how do we find your blog? I found it the other day and put up a link, but the blog that you're
Yes, thank
doing.
you. So it's on our new website. So technically it's not very easily found, but if you follow me on Instagram, there's a link in my bio that takes you right to the blog itself. And then if you want to see the blog postings, they're weekly on Fridays. We post
Mhm.
them to the Fall River Historical Society's Instagram and Facebook page. And then I usually share them as well to both my personal Facebook page, my Instagram, and then my history Facebook page, which is The Key
What
is to Educate.
what is it? Honor me? What is the name? Honor me? What did you say your blog was? The name of your
Oh,
blog?
the blog is called Time Travels.
Oh, time travels. Okay.
Time
Yeah,
travels.
acquisitions and anecdotes from the Fall River Historical Society.
Yeah. Now, are they still doing Tiny Tuesday? I enjoyed reading the Tiny Tuesday
Yeah,
entries as
Caroline does the
well.
Tiny Tuesdays. Yeah, she
Yeah,
finds a bunch of stuff,
little
yeah, throughout the
little
society. It's
artifacts
great.
to write about. I mean, you could spend a whole afternoon on the Historical Society website, just looking at the Lizzie
Easily.
collection and all these little special features. I can't wait to see the new one because the old website was wonderful, and you're telling me the new one's going to be even better.
It's
So that's a
so user
yeah,
friendly. It's the pictures that are on there. There's so many things that are going to be up and coming for the website that we just didn't have the capabilities to do on the old one. So it's going to be really, really cool and hopefully a little bit more interactive. And yeah, I can't wait for this to roll out. So spend a couple of days going through it because I think it will probably
yeah,
take you that long.
yeah. And then every
So
week we can tune in too for new stuff, the new
Yes.
features,
Yeah.
the new
Every week
blog.
there will be new
Yeah,
stuff.
every week. We love it.
that's
We love
exciting.
that.
So, in the historical society, do they still have the costuming on the second floor of the period
Yes.
dresses and stuff like that?
Fashion
Yeah.
gallery.
I love
Around
that
the
part of it too.
1850s to the
Yeah,
1950s is the span that we
yeah,
Yeah.
have exhibited right now.
Oh,
yeah.
good, good. I was afraid that you needed the space for something else. And then there was a Fall River Line exhibit as well, and that's
Yes.
still going to be there. And of course, the gift shop, new items coming in, and
Always new stuff out and about.
Yeah, we're always looking
So,
for new Lizzie stuff too. So
so
Yes.
Nancy,
I'm wearing the
Na-
earrings tonight from the Historical
okay.
Society.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah, and I have the brooch. Yeah,
Um,
wherever I go, people have something to say about, "Oh, where did you get those?" You got to go to the Historical Society to get them.
so Nancy said, "You're amazing with your information, so well spoken," and
Oh,
I
thank you, Grandma.
agree. I agree.
Nancy
Um,
Jerome. Yeah.
so
That's my grandma. Hi.
Oh, that's great.
Oh.
That's so cute. So David also said maybe Danielle, you would sign my huge Lizzie Borden Parallel Lives. Sign. He already has it signed by the two Fall River authors, and that would top his collection. So, so
Yeah,
I
I mean, I have
yeah.
nothing to do with it, but yeah, absolutely. I'd be more than happy to sit down and talk Lizzie with
Oh,
you.
oh, he wants
Oh.
all of everyone
Oh
involved.
Oh,
boy.
there you go.
Yeah, that's
That's
funny.
great. And so
I don't
you're
know if
working.
you know Danielle. I also wrote a Lizzie Borden book. It's called, but it's a little bit different. It's called Lizzie Borden and Other Murderous Women, and I was
Oh,
fascinated by
cool.
finding other murderous women of that century that committed murders and were acquitted.
Mhm.
So
Surprisingly not hard to do.
Yeah.
right. And I included a bunch of the other women's stories in that book. It wasn't only about Lizzie Borden. So that's
Oh,
the
send me
take
the link to that. I would love to read
yeah.
that.
And I talked about women in that society and how they were repressed. And I actually am doing an anthology this summer that's coming out with Staten Island writers, and we're writing short stories,
Mm.
poetry, and one of my stories in there. I'm always fascinated by women and time period pieces. So the one I am writing about is about Beatrice Cenci, who her family was executed in the 1500s because of parricide. She killed her father for abusing her, and the whole
Oh,
family
wow.
got executed. It's a really super intense story. They all got beheaded, and I wrote a short story about that. It's like 22 pages, but it's included in this anthology. But I'm always fascinated about women in crime
Mhm.
and why they commit crime. And you're right. There's a ton of stories besides Lizzie Borden that can be explored.
Wow. And when
Hmm.
I look at the demographic for my own blog and social media, it is 79% female
Wow,
readers
doesn't surprise
in
me. Yeah.
in the
That doesn't
age,
surprise me in the
yeah,
least.
79%, and the age group is the highest number is in the 45 to 55-year-old women are my readers.
Hmm.
That's my
Interesting.
audience. And a small amount of men. So, but yeah. Well, why is that? Because the idea of women being violent somehow is just so uh, against type, not
I kind of
nurturing.
look at I honestly kind of look at Lizzie as a superhero. You know, I mean, she was murdered, but you have to look at her. She really defended herself as a woman. Because she
Mhm.
was really well read, and I think maybe she lived. Well, she did live in a society where men basically owned all the property, and if you're a woman back then and you have any sort of intelligence, and you can't excel in like only being a teacher or a nurse, you're only allowed to go so far. Maybe she wanted, because she was into the arts, which I really loved about her, into theater, all of that. And that to me struck me as a woman who was really just loved everything about life and art and music, and wanted to be her own person. She wanted to be her own person. And I think
Well,
that's with many women of that time period.
you have a lot of spinsters in the Borden saga, which
Plenty.
I they didn't get married, and Lizzie's friends didn't get married, like
And they
Ellen
had money.
Shove,
Yeah.
Helen Layton, her doctor, Annie McRae, single woman doctor, very unusual for the time. And they all went against type. of the expectations for that time period. You get married, you have children, and you don't have a career. And,
Right.
Emma stayed single, and Alice Russell, who had to work, she didn't really have a choice. But I sat down and made a list of all of the unmarried females in the Borden story, and it was very long. And I'm thinking that's really kind of fascinating when you think what the norm would have been. And they were sort of gone. They were going against type, uh, over and above the whole story, of course, of the murders. And well, I mean, we could be here all night talking about these things, but it's fascinating. Not only that the murder story is fascinating, but the period in which this happened is fascinating. So much was going on in world history, and so if you're a historian and you have your master's degree in history, uh, it covers so much stuff that you love: the
Mm.
Industrial Revolution, the Victorian era, all of these. Um, gosh, I mean, you could write any number of papers. And what I love about Parallel Lives, it is indeed Lizzie superimposed upon her city during the time of all of these things changing and happening, the Cotton Centennial, all the things that were going on, which made her who she was. Lizzie was very much a product, I think, of Fall River and of that era in
Oh
history.
yeah, absolutely. And I think
Yeah.
what's really difficult about this case specifically is that it's become so popularized in modern culture that we largely, the people who know the story of Lizzie Borden is heavily steeped in folklore and fiction.
Hmm.
So you learn about that little subset of it, which is not the truth, of course, but then you begin to research it and find out all the facts about it. But you're still looking at it through, 2020 lenses, because a lot of how people lived and what was socially acceptable and how you were to interact in society and with yourself and with the church and all these other things, there was a lot of things that were unspoken that you were expected to either do or not do. Just like when Lizzie
Hmm.
was acquitted and she wasn't accepted back at church, it was never said to her, hey, you're not welcomed here. But she knew she would not be received back at that church based on a very nonverbal but very loud, everyone picked up and moved away from her
Hmm.
when she sat in the family pew. So things were just so different back then that without having that understanding of what life was like in the 1800s, it's, I think, a lot harder to understand the little intricacies that really do make up this story that sound really suspicious today, but that's just how things were done back then. And
Exactly.
without going into too much detail, because I could talk your ear off all night about this, I
Yeah,
think
I
it's
Uh,
really
totally, I
important
get
to
where you're
do a
coming
little bit
from.
of research
Yeah.
on, on history, just
hmm
so you can get a better understanding of what it is that you're reading, not just the Borden case, but that time period in general.
So, I totally get where you're coming from, Danielle. I
Yeah.
understand you loud and clear what you're saying.
hmm
Um, Joanne asked, I think this is what she's asking. Do you miss dressing in the 1890s outfits?
Okay, so Joanne, I think you know this already, and I know Shelley does, but I still don the 1890s garb, or sometimes, 1810s, 1780s. A friend of mine, Shannon, is a wonderful seamstress, and she loves making period correct outfits. So a lot of the opportunities that we have to maybe go to Halloween events at local athenaeums or the Halloween parade that we represented the Historical Society at this year. We both dressed in period appropriate costume and, walked the streets of Fall River appropriately.
I
So,
love it.
yeah, so
I
any
actually
excuse to
carry,
dress
yeah.
up, I am there.
I this Halloween, I actually last Halloween, I actually carried a hatchet with me. I dressed as Lizzie. So like,
Well, it's funny because Shannon, who is one of my dear friends now, we met in grad school and we ended up becoming friends via Lizzie because one of the questions was, what do you do for a living? And I said, I work at the Lizzie Borden house. And she said,
mm.
oh, I dressed up as Lizzie one year for Halloween. And she sent me pictures and we've been, you know, we were fast friends ever since.
Well, I think people somehow enjoy. You and I have seen the give and take between the audience and the performer when we do these reenactments. They come through the door and they want to be there. They want to see it as it unfolded that day. And when you do historical reenactment, it's a vehicle to help bring people to that place and time. Um,
Oh
I'm
yeah,
always ready.
absolutely.
I'm
Shelley,
always ready to do it.
I think one of your ideas, I don't know if I'm out of line to mention it, but having real time reenactment done of everything happening simultaneously.
That was a
Just,
project I'd worked
yeah,
on for a long
that would be
time,
amazing.
and I had at one point 17 people. The last script I did was 2015. But I had talked to Leanne about not on August 4th because we had people coming to see, but on another day to have a guilty and innocent version. We'll have two Lizzies. Every actor would have a timeline, and we
Right.
would walk it in real time, starting probably from the time Bridget comes downstairs. And every character would be walking in real time in the space where, we know they were. And I always thought that some things might become apparent about what could be seen, and maybe something that wouldn't fit if we actually did it in real time. I still hope to do it before I die. So hopefully that will happen soon. I'm not getting any younger.
Jeez.
But, it's kind of like, yeah,
That would
it's a
be a
for,
really interesting and amazing experiment, though,
and
for sure.
I'd like to film
Yeah.
it. I would like to
Yeah.
film it, and we'd have a stopwatch, and we will go to what we know of who said what, when, where they
So
were.
basically, it would
Yeah.
prove or disprove if it was possible, like
Hmm.
like the way things happen in the timeline that we
And the
know that it
timeline, will it
happened.
actually
Yeah,
fit where people said they
right.
were? Of course, the problem back then was I read that the clocks, we're so time oriented now with the digital clocks. Sometimes the clocks were as much as 20 minutes off. Uh, Punctuality, I guess, wasn't as big a deal.
Mm,
And the city hall clock did not agree with the mantle clock. Mrs.
yeah.
Kelly's clock was different. So I guess there's a little leeway in time, but I sure hope to make it happen one day. And I know two ladies who would probably fill in a few parts for me. I know I could get an Emma.
I'll volunteer.
Okay,
Oh, give me
I
a
got
part. I don't care.
okay. I got costumes. I got a closet
Yeah.
full of costumes, so we're all set. We're
I'll
good.
even be a videographer. I don't care.
That would be great.
So another question. We're getting close to the end of our podcast, but they want
Oh,
Dan
that flew by.
Hmm.
yeah, Danielle. David wants to know, what do you think about the bloody rags in the basement the day of the murders, and what about Bridget's conflicting testimony? That's a good one.
Yeah, that's always an interesting question, right? I don't know if people are aware of the menstrual bucket that would have been in the basement at the time. So that was very common for you to have, blood-soaked rags in a menstrual bucket for obvious reasons. And it was said that it's possible that Lizzie was on her menstrual cycle at the time of the murders. So for me, that's where I lean more towards because that would make sense logically versus having another random bucket with bloody rags in it, which makes for an interesting story but doesn't really seem too legitimate in my opinion. I think a lot of that is it makes sense to point a guilty finger, which is where a lot of the rumors stemmed from was if you thought Lizzie Borden is guilty, she's guilty because of all these different accusations that you could put from all these different people. So a lot of that was just based in fallacy. So if I had to say what I think that was, it was just the menstrual bucket.
Yeah, yeah.
We have another
Eh,
question.
Oh, it's Randy from Texas. Hi, Randy. Do you think it's possible that Lizzie had assistance in committing or concealing the murders? An accomplice?
That's tough for me to answer because that would be suggestive that I thought she did it.
Hmm.
And I think she was acquitted. Like, I don't have an opinion either way about who I think the murderer or murderess was. All that I know for sure is that there's an hour and a half between both murders, which is strange. And being that both were killed is suggestive that both were meant to be killed, in my opinion. That's the only thing I'm really going to speculate on, is because there were two murders with such a time in between. To me, that feels like both were the intended. Because why just kill one and then just happen to stumble upon another murder by accident? That seems a little strange to me. But as far as the timeline for Mr. Borden, there is an extremely short window from the time that Mr. Borden was murdered and the time that Lizzie finds her father's body and yells upstairs for Bridget. It's such a short window. So having anyone commit murders in that time period to then be able to either clean or conceal blood and get out of the house, it almost seems like a superpower, because it just doesn't seem possible to be able to do that in such a short period of time and to not be seen or not have any evidence on you that you just were in a crime scene.
So another question was, do you think there's any possible way Emma could have had a hand in the murders? And that's from Joey.
Okay, Joey, you know Emma was on horseback. We, a little inside joke. We always say that Emma rode from.
Dressed as a man, yes, in men's
Yes, yeah.
clothing. Hmm.
Dun, 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 and goes back and forth to Fall River very quickly. No, I, to be quite frank, I think she has a pretty solid out. You know, I'm no authority figure on the matter, but I think she has a pretty solid alibi. And, Joey or Uncle John, we went to the house, and being in the car and making that trip is a lengthy process.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
thinking about the modes of transportation in which she would have to take one way, it just logistically, if she were to leave Fairhaven, come back to the Borden house, commit the murders, go back to Fairhaven, she wouldn't have made it back to Fall River when she did.
That's right, in time to get the telegram that Dr. Bowen had sent. That's right.
I mean,
And I
between the
mean,
trolley and the train and everything else, like that just, I mean,
mhm,
everything would have had to fall in line just so. And she, the Brownells didn't miss her at all or notice that she was gone for almost an entire, day. So that it seems like it would be interesting to think about, but doesn't really seem to hold water.
Hmm. I agree with that. I do agree. Danielle, I don't agree with everything you say, but I agree with that.
Of course, yeah, that's part of the fun, right? We
Yeah,
don't have
I
to agree
know,
with each
I
other.
know, right,
we've
yeah,
all
yeah,
got
yeah.
a,
But they're
all got
good,
our own
yeah.
theories.
Yeah, some
It's just
spirited
such
debates start from
a.
one's ideas.
There was something else somebody else said. Well,
I'll try
Tracy
to
said
get
I want
this.
to dress up too, so she wants to be a part of our dress up.
Oh, okay.
Uh,
Okay, I need an Alice Russell, so you got it.
so did how many pets in all did Lizzie have? I know. Did she have? Okay, here's a question. Did she have a black cat? Because
She
I
did.
I was there's something. Isn't there like evidence of a picture or something with a black cat? Her black cat.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So at the Historical Society, we have a picture of Blackie, who is her black cat. Oops, sorry. Um,
Time's up.
in Maplecroft. Yeah. There's an alarm on my phone. Sorry. Yeah, but we have the picture of Blackie in Maplecroft, which is fantastic. And the the even cooler thing, if I may be so bold, is that it is one of the only existing interior shots that is out there of Maplecroft when she was living there.
You
Wow,
don't
I
see,
would
you
love to
don't
see that.
see a
Is that
lot
on
though.
exhibit? The Blackie cat?
No. Yes. Yep. That is out on
Oh,
exhibit.
I would
It's
Oh,
love to
right
see
if
that.
you come
now.
into
Okay.
the library, yeah, on
Mhm.
one of the library bookshelves where the stool is that was in her jail cell, up
Yeah.
on the very top shelf in the back, very dimly lit for obvious reasons, is the picture of Blackie in Maplecroft.
But you don't see a whole lot. Isn't it just sort of like a piano scarf and the cat is sitting? You don't really see any of the furniture at Maplecroft or the wallpaper. Uh,
It's such a close crop that you
yeah,
really don't see
yeah.
much at all.
I wish we had interior shots of Maplecroft more than anything.
I know, I know.
Well, you
Yeah.
I
never know.
really
They
wish
might
we
pop
had.
up somewhere. You never know. They might pop up
Sorry, baby
somewhere.
doll is joining the party.
Oh, that's great.
Oh, I
Well,
love a
she heard about
kitty.
Blackie. Yeah,
Kitty.
it's
Yeah,
the cat
She's
segment.
such
We're
a
doing the
beautiful
cat
cat, and
segment.
she kept her blue eyes. She kept her blue eyes.
yeah.
Yeah. Well,
So,
Lizzie had canaries, Kimbra. She had one canary whose name was Gary Owen,
it's funny. It's
and
true.
she had
What
multiple
a name.
canaries, and of course the dogs and Blackie. I'm not aware of any other pets. Her
Oh,
squirrels.
horses. She had she didn't she go to a horse
She
or
had
she owned
Kenneth,
two.
Kenneth and Graham. Was it Kenneth and Graham? Her
Yeah,
two
it was,
horses.
because it was so weird
Hmm.
because that's Kenny's name, Kenny Graham, the guy who's behind the scenes directing this show right now.
Hi,
It's
Kenny.
and
Yeah.
Graham. It's like so weird.
Oh, there's a plaque, a memorial plaque at Red Acre Farm. I forget what town that is in Massachusetts, dedicated to Lizzie's two horses. Of course, we all know how involved she was in animal welfare and animal anti-vivisection and these things. I think Helen Layton got her involved in that. But there's another side of Lizzie too.
Yeah,
She was multifaceted person for sure. And the
definitely.
more you
Both her
learn,
and Emma were huge
yeah,
philanthropists.
yeah.
I think that's something that
Mhm.
could, be a small book in and of itself, or at least an article.
Well, there
Just
you
the
go.
amount of,
And you're just the one to write it too.
yeah,
I will buy the first copy I want. It
Well,
will be fascinating.
we're gonna sign off, but one last thing I just wanted to touch base. First of all, if we ask you back, Danielle, would you come back to be on our
absolutely.
podcast? Because I have a bunch of questions, but still, but I always think
Part two to
that
be continued.
yes,
To be
exactly.
continued.
Nowadays we watch TV and we involve ourselves with all these technologies. Back then they didn't have anything like that. They just had reading books. So
Hmm.
I always felt like women were really smart. And if when I read the trial transcripts, I thought those lawyers were so intelligent and well
Hmm.
read, and they spoke so elegant,
Well spoken.
well
Yeah. Silver
spoken
tongue.
with really interesting words, and I just think back then people were really super smart as compared to today when I feel like society has become dumber, cuz we watch way too much TV, we don't read anymore. You know what I'm
Yeah, well,
saying?
everything's visual now, right? So we don't really have to
Hmm.
Yeah.
go into that elaborate type of description that you see.
Yeah.
And I will say this until I'm blue in the face, I am lucky enough that I get to work with microfilm at my job.
Yeah.
And reading some of the articles that were published, the amount of detail that goes into even a one paragraph about, someone's horse and buggy getting away, or a wheel falling off, or a little boy who, broke his leg. The amount of detail that goes into these is because there was no, photographs that you could just flip through. There was no radio, there
Hmm.
was no
Hmm.
TV. So everything was done by reading. So you got out in your community, you interacted with the public, you got into different church organizations and
Oh my god.
functions, and you got into societies, and you would do needlepoint as a woman, or you would do music, or you would teach in the church.
Hmm.
There's
Travel
there's a
too.
lot of
Yeah.
stuff that you did. Oh yeah, of course, if you had the money,
Hmm.
as one
So,
does, you would travel.
Grand
wow,
tour.
you just answered a
Hmm.
question I could not answer today, and you just answered it for me, which is really crazy. So you talk about describing things back then and very descriptive. I was told my piece that I wrote from the 1500s. Somebody said, "Oh, it feels like I'm back in the 1500s," and I said I did my job. But then somebody else said it's dense. Now I understand because I
Word dense.
purposely tried to use descriptive prose to write
Hmm.
that, to make it be like what you're talking about. But I didn't understand at first oh, it's so dense. So I'm going back and I'm cutting out words. But now I'm thinking, I don't need to cut out these words because it's what you are saying. the way
Yeah.
things were written
Yeah,
back
that's
then.
like is painting a picture. I
Thank
mean,
you.
of
I
course you
feel
can be
better.
redundant and a little too long-winded, but I mean that can
Yeah,
happen with the
that's
best of
me.
us. But in general, when you're writing something, I think people who are going to read, especially when it comes to like a really niche thing, like if
Yeah.
you're going to write a Lizzie Borden book, you better have a good angle because it's been done.
Yeah,
Hmm.
of
So
course.
if you're going to talk about a topic, I would say that, details matter. I say that to my boyfriend all the time. Details matter.
Yeah.
Because if you hold on to them, you can read between the lines and see different things.
Mhm.
And so
Yeah.
reading the newspaper articles, it's not just a good story or a bad story. It's they put you there and take you through the process of what occurred that day. And I think that's so fascinating and a lost art in a sense where
Yeah.
people are kind of just
And
publishing to
yeah,
publish now for articles
Yeah.
and not really doing their due diligence as far as the research. And don't get me wrong, I am not saying they did back then because there were a lot of news articles that was just fiction and it was just to
hmm,
sell papers. And we
Well,
all know that
there's
by reading some of the articles in the Lizzie Borden case.
what is that
yeah.
large book that has all of the newspaper articles in?
The
It's
source book. It's called the
yeah, the
Lizzie
source
Borden
book.
source book.
I
Hmm.
actually really enjoyed reading that though. It
Hmm.
was really interesting, and there was one of my favorite reporters in there, Hal, I think his name was. I don't know if he wrote for the New York Times. I'm not sure. There's so much information, it just explodes your head. But he
Yeah.
was talking about when the trial was going on about how um, was it a horse outside of the window neighing, or there was an animal that was
It
making
was a
noise, bothering.
cow
It was a
on
cow
the
mooing. Yes,
on the
that was
town green
hilarious. It was
that
so-
was in New Bedford during the
yeah, yeah,
trial.
yeah, yeah.
You
There
could
was a
hear it
cow
through the
mooing.
window. Yeah,
Yeah.
Like,
well, they had to paint the picture without any photography. So you had to use words because there wasn't photography in newspapers.
right.
There were sketches sometimes,
Yes.
newspaper artists, but without a photograph, you painted the picture with vocabulary, and we just don't have that vocabulary anymore.
No, not at all.
It's a
Not at all.
lost art. I know this from
Yeah.
teaching English for a number of years. We operate on a daily basis with about a 400 word vocabulary. You read Moody's closing argument. The man and Robinson, they were
Yeah.
both
Brilliant.
just silver tongue orator,
Hmm.
and no one talks like that anymore. It's it's
No.
a it's a thrill just to read that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But
So, Shelly,
yeah,
we have to sign off, but
yeah, we do, we
Danielle,
do.
thank you so much for coming. I really enjoyed having you here and
It
talking
was
about the
wonderful.
historical society and
It's good to
Yeah,
see
thank you for
you.
having me. This was fantastic. It's
yeah,
nice to talk
and
about Lizzie.
I'm gonna be coming up to Fall River sometime this summer, and I hope to see you at the historical society. I hope you're there, and I'll pop by and say hi.
Yeah, I'll
And
be there with
I'll
bells
be
on.
there. You bet. The second week in May, you're going to be open, and I
Hmm.
will be there. Can't wait. It's a beautiful
Wonderful.
time of year to come in
It
May
is.
in Fall River,
And there's so
um,
much to do in the city.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
more every day. A couple of new
Hmm.
restaurants, and the story. I guess there's a light rail coming in. They are have connections to Boston. It'll soon be a lot easier to get into the city when all of that is
Yeah.
finished.
Mm.
Yeah, that's exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
so
good
thanks
times are coming.
again. And thank you, everyone that tunes in. When we have these podcasts, we appreciate you coming out and hanging out with us with all
Now,
your
Kimbra,
questions. Yes,
we didn't have any tea. We had murder,
right,
but we didn't have tea.
right.
So before we go, I've got to tell you
Oh, okay. You
about
got a tea.
Harney and Son for the coronation of King Charles and Queen Consort Camilla. We're going to have coronation tea. It's a Darjeeling and it's wonderful. I've been having it as we've been talking. And you can get that on Amazon. It's called Coronation Tea, Harney and Sons, and you'll keep the tin because it's a nice little commemorative. So there's your tea.
Okay. Yay. All right. Until next time,
Wonderful.
everyone, we'll see you then. Bye
Lovely
bye.
to see you. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.